Welcome, listeners, to another amazing, fantastic, very exciting bonus episode of Oh My Word. And today we have with us someone, wait for it, someone who is a librarian, an artist, and a writer, and a mother, so she basically does everything. So please put your hands together. Let's welcome Rebekah Lowell to the program. Welcome, Rebekah.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and looking forward to chatting with you.
Oh, we and I are definitely looking forward as well. And this is very exciting. So let's dive in. Starting off with the librarian aspect, how did you get your children's librarian in a public library, correct?
Yes, MacArthur Public Library. Yes, in my hometown of Biddeford, Maine.
Oh, wow. So how did you become a librarian? Is that something you went to school for? Is that something, I want to be always with books? Or how did you get there?
Yeah, so I always had in the back of my mind that I loved the role of children's librarian and thought one day, I might land there. But I never thought it would be like on this side of things. I always thought like maybe later when, I wanted something to do after my kids were grown. But I was home one summer. I was coming home from an MFA program in children's literature at Hollins University, children's literature and illustration. It was a dual program. And I've always loved the librarians at MacArthur, and it's where I went as a kid. So I used to run up the stairs, 5 years old, dive into, room full of books, and I loved going there. I was just in awe of the shelves. Loved the way the books smelled, loved talking to the librarians, loved seeing what they had that was new. And being a frequent patron, one day I was talking to the librarian, Kathy, who was actually my librarian as a kid, and just telling her about my program, telling her what I was up to, told her I was working on my thesis, almost done. And she looks at me and she goes, "You want a job?"
What?
And I was like, "Really? That would be awesome. Like, let's talk." And so it kind of went from there. So by me opening up and sharing my work and sharing what I was up to and just catching up with her, one thing led to the other. And I was going to start as a sub. And then they offered me a part-time position. And I accepted. So now I've been working from home, but it's a great library. I love it there.
Wow. Well, just the way you're describing how you used to love to run up the steps and dive into a stack of books, I'm like, wow, that's the most beautiful thing. That's so beautiful. So okay, now I know it's a little bit different, but when you are in the library, what's a day-to-day, like what are you doing day-to-day besides for putting books back on the shelves?
Yeah, so pre-COVID, I would bring my two daughters. I homeschool, so they always came with me. We've always homeschooled, even before the pandemic.
Oh.
And so the only way I could actually have this position was if the library was willing for me to take my children with me. And because I was working in the kids' room, it was like, yeah, I'll just like hang out and read books and do their school. And,
right.
It was a natural place for them to be. So we'd pack up, the girls would bring their books. We'd, stay there from, my typical shift was 9 to 12, 2 days a week. And I would create library cards, chat with kids about recommendations, help people with computer passes, of course, put books back on the shelf, also write, like, one thing I really loved doing was write these recommendation cards, and then you could stick them out of the book, and it would be like, librarian pick, and it would be like Rebecca's pick, and then there's Deanna's pick, and Kathy's pick, and so, because I love reading, I would also love to share what I thought was great about books when kids are like, oh, I'm looking for more like this, and I'd be like, well, how about this one? And I loved pairing kids with books according to their taste.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
Well, so like how many books do you actually have to have read to be able to do that, and how many is it that you're just familiar with the book that you've got on the shelves?
I basically am always reading a book, but they don't have a minimum. They just encourage us to, if you have nothing to do, pick a stack of picture books and sit there at your desk, and read these picture books. And so you can be well informed.
Right.
they didn't mind if we were reading if it was low. Like if there was not much to do, patrons were all helped. They were happy, content. We could be at our desk reading.
Right.
And that's so we can stay informed and so we can offer recs. So not a requirement per minimum, but just read what you love, and picture books we didn't have young adult in our room. We were picture books to middle grade. Young adult was upstairs. So.
Okay. Oh, so picture books to middle grade, though, that's a big range. I mean, picture books you can get through a lot quickly, but middle grade, you actually have to a little bit more time to read that.
Yeah, actually, I should say it was board books to middle grade, because we also had board books.
Oh, wow.
So, wide range, yes.
And then, so aside from your assisting patrons to find books or things like that, were there other programs that the library is running that you got to arrange? Either reading times or things like that you got to be on top of?
Yeah, I actually offered a program as well. Once a week we had something called Kids Club, where we made art projects for kids that were like 8 to 12, like for the middle grade crowd. They also had story times, Baby and Me. We would also reserve rooms for anyone who needed to use a room for meetings that they were having that were separate. We had Heidi Stemple come for a book talk. We've had Lynn Ford. All kinds of authors have come to see us, and those were really fun as well. Making bulletin boards. I got to use some of my art skills for a collage, and just, lots happening all the time.
So it actually almost sounds like your library is a little bit of a community center. If you're doing art projects and meetings and
yep. And the rooms were free, for use unless they were being used for profit, and then it was a cost. But, someone could just book a room and use it for their meeting for whatever purpose they needed. So there was a lot of that happening too. Not so much now, but
right.
we still try to be a center with lots of resources, where people can come for answers and get information.
Wow. So the library, there's no part of it that's open now, not even for drop off, pickup and the curbside pickup or anything like that?
We have a mail order system for books at the moment, and just, I think last week, because I'm still working from home because I would have to bring my kids, so I'm not just one employee, I'd be 3 people.
Yeah.
So I'm working from home still, but the library has started opening for appointment only. So they're monitoring, they have a minimum of people they can let in, and they're monitoring how that is going. So they're not open fully, but they're open at a small capacity.
Wow. And are those appointments already full? People are eager to get back to the library, or do you have to convince people?
It seems to be, yeah. People have been eager. There's a lot of resources that some of our patrons don't have, like maybe they don't have internet or things like that. So a lot of resources that they don't have if the library is completely closed that I know they've been anxious to get back to.
Wow. So I don't know, I'm just thinking about this right now. I don't know if you can fully answer this. Like, I wonder what the difference between working in a public library is versus being like a school librarian. Aside from, I guess, a school librarian, you have a much smaller clientele, I guess you could say. Or is there more going on in a public library, or you don't really know?
I'm not sure in comparison to a school library because I haven't been to one, but I could, imagine, like you said, it is a smaller clientele. It's more enclosed. With a public library, there's, always traffic coming and going, many ages instead of like a classroom of kids that you really get to know intimately. Our patrons are coming and going. We do get a lot of repeat patrons, so you get to know them over time. But I've been working there since 2018, and I definitely don't know everyone that comes and goes. So it's probably not as contained. We serve a wide audience.
That's great, because I mean, it's great to know all the people, but also not knowing all the people means that a lot of people are coming, so that's also great.
It does truly feel like a community center at times.
That's fantastic.
In the best sense.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll get there back to opening soon. So now, okay, I thought I had something else, but I think I forgot it. Anyways, so now transitioning over, that you're doing you're writing and writing and illustrating, or what came first, writing or illustrating or drawing? Are you officially an illustrator, or are you just also an artist?
Yeah, I'm officially an illustrator, also a fine artist. Just started picking up surface pattern design, so now I can throw designer in there as well because I wanted to make more art. So I basically have always drawn. I feel like I picked up pencils as soon as I could. Like, I think back, I had very, very encouraging parents. I was homeschooled myself,
Right.
which created a lot of freedom and a lot of time, like, for me to explore things that I loved. And my parents bought me oil paints. I think I was about 7. And I used to watch Bob Ross, and there was someone named Alexander. I don't remember his last name. But my favorite thing was to watch these painting shows.
Oh.
And I would paint, happy little trees. And, I just loved it. And I look back and I just think, wow, like my parents, they would invest in these expensive oil paints and at times professionally framed.
Oh, wow.
These things that I painted on canvas paper. And it was the biggest encouragement. My dad built me an easel. I still have it. Like, I have my first easel.
Wow.
So I really entered the world of art through oil painting. And I always knew I wanted to go to art school. It was kind of like I had no plan B.
Right.
So I homeschooled,
Yeah.
went to high school because I wanted to get involved in the art programs. And then, I went straight to SCAD was my first year. Then I transferred to RISD. Writing was there too because I journaled a ton as a kid and as a young adult. And even now, like, journaling was sort of how I entered the world of writing. Just stream of consciousness, dump all your thoughts, and just pages and pages of journals. And then I stumbled into novels and verse and didn't even realize what I was writing.
Wow.
It was amazing. This is how I write. I write in poetry, I write in verse, but I didn't know novels and verse were a thing at the time that I started writing mine. And it was actually Cece Bell. I met her at Hollins University, and we were having a critique together of my first pages of my novel before it was a novel. And she's like, "You're writing a novel in verse." And I said, "I am?"
What? Yeah. Oh, that's a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and she recommended I read Brown Girl Dreaming.
Wow.
So that was my first read of a novel in verse, and I was just blown away. I was just like, this is gorgeous. This is everything that I love. So yeah, that's how I stumbled into writing.
Wow. Well, cause that actually makes sense because there aren't that many novels in verse. So it would be, you'd have to really stumble across it to find it because it's not. I know they try to promote it a little bit more now, but there's not really that many. Not even relatively speaking. There's so few.
Yeah, there's so many beautiful ones coming out now. Other Words for Home by Jasmine Warga. I love that one. There's just, I feel like it's really having its moment. The novel in verse is rising. Like, there's so many good ones.
Good. Hey, good books, that's always a winner as far as I'm concerned. The book world always needs good books, so that's great. So that's interesting that you start off as an artist. Were you thinking that you were just going to be an artist, and then all of a sudden you stumbled, then you're like, wait, and I can write a book too? Or you were just...
Well, I've always wanted to write and illustrate picture books. That's where I thought that I would kind of stay.
Right.
Like, I figured my writing was picture books. And the first time that my first picture book dummy was one that I made at RISD. My last year at RISD, there was a class called Picture and Word. And it was Judy Sue Goodwin Sturgis. And we made a dummy, a picture book dummy, and mine was about a whippoorwill. Like, I'd love to pull the story out one day and, like, rewrite it as, like, given what I know now, like, I could look at that dummy and be like, oh, so many things I need to fix.
Right, yeah.
But that marriage of picture and word, like, that unity of one completing the other just is what I love about picture books, because it's not redundancy. It's not like the words are showing you what the pictures show you. You know, it's
right.
It's not repetition. You got to have the two, and it's a complete art form when you have the two that are complementing each other. And so I've always wanted to write and illustrate, but I had no idea I would end up writing a novel.
Wow. Well, I think also because so many people, I guess you're coming though just because from your love for picture books, but a lot of people think, oh, I want to break into writing, I'll start with a picture book. It must be so easy. And then I realized, like, no, it's not so easy, because you have to find even less words to say what you want to say. Like,
yes, exactly. It's, you know, and the beauty is in that sparseness.
Yeah.
You know, if you can get it there, that it's, you know, having those pictures tell a different story, like the same, but aside from it, I love it. It's beautiful.
Well, I guess writing in verse is the next thing, because that's sparseness in a way also.
Yes.
So
yeah, there's a rhythm, there's an impact in the way that you break the lines, there's an intentionality to it. The second novel I'm working on is actually in verse and prose. Oh. And I'm having a harder time with the prose chapters because it's dual POV, and so I split the voices, and I'm like, the verse just like flows, and then it gets to the prose, and I'm gonna work on it a lot more. There's
so many words. Yeah. So once you did write this novel in verse, where did you, like, what happened next? Were you already agented at the time, or then you had to go find yourself an agent? We should preface that you have a novel coming out. This novel, a middle grade novel in verse, is coming out. The Road to After, The Road to After, and it's coming out in 2022.
Yes, spring 2022 with Nancy Paulson Books.
Nancy Paulson Books.
You know, it's just amazing that the first novel that I read and that I loved was, you know, Jackie Woodson, and I have to pinch myself because I'm like, wait, I'm on the same list as Jackie Woodson.
Oh, wow.
Like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
You know, like, it came full circle in the best way.
Yeah, that is kind of crazy to think about. Like,
yeah.
Where am I? How did I get here? So, but once you did write, so once you finished, you had the manuscript for the novel in verse, and we'll speak about what it is in a moment. But so, where did you go from there? Were you agented at the time, or then you had to go pitch to an agent, or you had met someone through something? How did that happen?
So I started the novel in 2016, and in the spring of 2018, at the New England SCBWI conference, I had a paid critique with Wendy Gu. At the time, she was with Janklow and Nesbitt, and I showed her a picture book manuscript. You get your 15 minutes, you meet face-to-face, and we chatted over my picture book manuscript. And she said during that meeting, you know, I'd love to see what else you have. Oh. So she didn't know I had a novel. I was submitting a picture book.
Right.
And I want to say it was like, she said, you know, follow up with me after the weekend. And so I did. I emailed her that Monday, I believe, and sent her what else I had. And I think by Tuesday or Wednesday, we were talking about getting on the phone, and my memory could be fuzzy on this, but I think it was within the week I had accepted her offer.
Wow. That's good story. Yeah. That is a great story, actually. Congratulations. Fantastic.
Thank you.
That's the way it should be for everyone. That's great. So
thank you.
But once she accepted, you had sent the novel in verse then, and she accepted. Yeah. She didn't say anything. There wasn't anything, a novel in verse might be hard to sell to middle grade. It wasn't anything like that. It was just, I love this. Let me be your person.
Yeah, she said she read it on a train, and she loved it, and she is editorial, so we just dove in and started working on it. There was a lot to cut.
Right.
You know, I think, so this novel, I think where it's at now, so I'm working on edits right now with Nancy, and I'm probably in, like, I haven't counted, but close to like 28 revisions of this book.
Wow.
So with Wendy, we were working on, you know, revision like 17, 18, 19, like, before it even went out. But I had already gone through over a dozen revisions on my own before Wendy saw it.
Yeah.
Actually, not completely on my own. I had hired a professor at Hollins to help me edit for the first few drafts because I really had no idea how to structure a middle grade novel. So I hired out Candace Ransom from Hollins University, and we worked on the structure together. And she helped me really get it in shape. No line edits, no wording, but the plotting and the flow and all of that.
Yeah.
So that was back in like 2017. So this project is years in the making, and it feels really, really good where it's at right now.
That's fantastic. Well, are you at the point right now that all revisions, even with the editor at publishing, are done, and then now you're just lining it up, or there's still edits ahead of you?
There are still edits ahead of us. I'm waiting on another round to come back to me. We're sort of playing ping pong with it at the moment.
Right.
So we're looking to wrap it up by the end of this fall or early winter. So I'm kind of in the thick of it, and including art. Working on the jacket, working on some interior spreads, chapter headers, things like that.
You're doing the art for all of that?
Yes.
Wow. That's extra, right? That doesn't always usually happen, or does it?
I don't think it's common. I don't think it's typical. But it's included in my contract.
Ah, very good. Your agent's great. Good job.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
I love her.
Wow. So, see, that's a thing also that you're saying probably, well, you're at 28 revisions now, you got X amount more ahead of you. I think people also think, oh, I wrote a book, I finished the manuscript, it's done, this is so great. It's like, no, there's so much more that has to be done. Finishing the manuscript is it's very hard, but it's only your first step. You have so much. I just need to know if you got to the point yet, because I've had this with editing some of my books, that there's always the one draft that you're like, if I have to read any more of this, I'm going to throw something at the computer. Because you're in it so much, and you have to read it again and again and again. And then usually after that, you'll go back to it, and it's like, okay, this is, okay, I do still love this story, but I always feel like there's a moment where it's like, if I have to read this one more time, I'm going to throw the computer. I'm done.
Right?
Yeah. Dano, did you get there? Are you there?
Thankfully, I am not there yet, and I think the advantage to me is that when my book sold, I had a year before I touched it. I sold it last April.
Wow.
And it gave me the opportunity to write my second novel and work on other projects, picture books, learn surface design, like paint some wildlife art, win the Maine Duck Stamp contest again. Like, it's just, I've done so many other creative things, and that's why I love being like multidisciplinary, because I get to change gears, and I'm not like writing novel after novel. I don't think I'm made to do that. I think I would have a hard time. So I love being able to paint or draw, or like I'm learning how to draw on the iPad now, and I have to change it up. And so I think I'm not there because I've had that opportunity to work on so many different things, and I've had that step back from the book, so I'm more objective about it. There's a lot that I was really, really attached to in edits with my agent, and I'm trying to be more flexible with edits with my editor.
Right.
She's the most understanding editor. I love Nancy, and she's so wonderful to work with. But there's so much as an author that you have to learn to let go of and be flexible and be willing to dive into those revisions wholeheartedly so that it can be the best book it can be. And that's kind of where I'm at now, is like I'm trying to trust that process.
Yeah. Wow. That's good though, that you're still that you had other things to take your mind off the book so you could come with it fresh. But signing you signed it in April. You said April 2019?
Yes.
So 3 years that you have to wait for your book to come out? When you first signed, were you thinking 3 years is in 1,000 years?
At first, but so I had the opportunity to choose. I had a few offers, and
okay.
I could have had a shorter timeline, but because I chose to work with Nancy, so for many reasons, I accepted that extra year. It would have been only 2 years,
right?
If I had chosen a different publisher,
right?
So I was prepared, and I said, you know what, it's worth it. it's worth it. It's okay.
That's great.
So, because I had so many other projects, I had picture books on submission and different things. So it was okay. You know, it was like, oh, bummer, like I have to wait 3 years. But on the other hand, it's given me that space to make it the best book.
And that's always worth it because once it comes out, it's out. So you
Right.
definitely, yeah, you're not gonna start rewriting.
You can't take it back.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So now, just we'll touch upon it a little bit because I did see a little bit about what the book's about. But why don't you tell us what the book's about? Because I know it's a little bit of a touchy subject, and also that you chose to write that for middle grade is interesting. So I guess that's a two-part. Like, what is the book about, and why did you decide to write it as this for a middle grade audience?
Yeah, so the book is about recovery from domestic abuse, and you're going to be super surprised when I tell you this book started as a picture book.
Yes, I am surprised. What? Yeah.
It started as a picture book because that was the format I knew, and I presented it to my professors, and they said this is middle grade material. Like you need to expand, and so I did, and. So it's about recovery from domestic abuse. I spent 10 years, in a very difficult situation, and my 2 daughters as well. And so this book is not about us, but it is written from a place of personal experience because I feel that I have that voice to be able to write that into a book.
Right.
And there aren't many books on this topic, but kids deal with so much. So I wanted to be able to help those kids feel seen, and even if the child who's going to read this book hasn't experienced that, I hope not everyone who reads this book has experienced that kind of life.
Yeah,
it can help with empathy. It can help with kids who are recovering from many different kinds of trauma, because the book isn't necessarily about being in trauma. It's about trying to rebuild your life after something difficult. And I'm hoping that story is universal enough that kids who have been through any form of trauma can take something from it and feel like there's hope. That's the message that, I don't want to have like a concrete message, but that's the heart of my book.
Right.
Is that there's hope. There is life after something difficult, and that you are strong enough to move on, and you can pick yourself back up, and others can pick you back up. It's not just being on your own.
That's amazing.
So that's what it's about.
So how much do you actually go into whatever abuse your protagonist has endured versus the focus of the recovery? Is it just kind of mentioned and now we know we're only seeing the recovery, or do we actually see any or reference, or know that any of this abuse has gone on in real time?
Yeah. So there are flashbacks throughout the book, which touches on PTSD. Basically, I'm trying to work that in so that it's a glimpse into the life of someone who has PTSD and what it's like to try to have normalcy, but yet have these intruding flashbacks affect your life where you're safe, but you may all of a sudden remember something and not feel safe, and what that's like to try to move on from. So the abuse shows up in flashbacks, and there's hints to things, and readers will definitely pick up on what's happening without experiencing too much of the reality.
Wow. Did you show the book to your daughters? Did they read it?
One of my daughters has read it, and the other one is holding off until she reads it from the shelves.
Oh,
so
wow.
I've given them the option. I have said, do you want to see these drafts?
Right.
Or, and so one of them is like waiting until it's the book.
Wow, good. Wow.
Yeah.
Right, because if their reaction to, I don't know if you were actually depending to see what their reaction to it would be, or you were just writing the book, and then the fact that your daughters can read it is like a side benefit, not like a bonus, not...
Yeah, so we had conversations because I wanted to make sure they were okay with it.
Okay, right.
A book is so permanent. It's on the shelf. It's sort of about their past, sort of not, sort of, it's not about us individually specifically, but there are so many things in the book that did happen, and there are so many things in the book that didn't.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure they'd be okay with it.
Yeah.
So when I started the book, they were I'm trying to do some math in my head at the moment.
Man.
So they're 11 and 13 now, and I started it, a handful of years ago. So that, they were still fairly young. But I explained to them, in a way that I knew they would understand, and just, do you feel okay about this?
Right.
Because, and they did.
Yeah.
So
oh, that's good. Yeah.
I'm grateful for that. If I had felt that it would really bother them and that they wouldn't want it, I wouldn't have tried to pursue it.
Yeah. Well, also because your name's on it.
I really want to be respectful of them.
Yeah, and your name's on it, so you can't avoid that. Like, your name's there. It's not like no one knows who wrote the book. We all know who wrote the book, and
Yeah.
So
I didn't want to use a pen name. I had considered it, but it's my way of sort of taking things back. I felt like if I used a pen name, I would still be hiding.
Oh, wow.
And
wow.
I wanted, because for me, there's a little bit of a safety aspect, a little bit of a risk, in publishing this, because the person that did abuse me is, still out there. So once this book is read and on shelves, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so I could have written it as a pen name, but part of me just didn't want to hide anymore. And I wanted to feel empowered and help others feel empowered.
Wow. Great. Now we got to wait like another year and a half to read this now. So I'm just curious though. Well, I don't know if it was if whoever you showed it to that said that you should go to middle grade. Like, why middle grade and not YA, or why not, just as a nonfiction or as a memoir or something like that? Like, why was there a specific reason they chose middle grade, or was it just that was like the youngest oldest that it would be appropriate to write for?
Yeah. So it was it started. It's mainly the age of my characters in there are middle grade. So if I would have written it for YA, which had been proposed in a round of submissions, this book went through 2 rounds of submissions. So in the first round, there was someone who proposed we change it to YA,
right.
And I was open to that. But it would have required basically a rewrite, where I would have had to age up the character. I could have added more material. I would have had to probably double or triple the length. So it was basically a genre, it was perfect for the middle grade genre in terms of length, the voice, and the age of the characters. It's about 20,000 words at the moment.
Oh.
Because novels and verse have to be a little bit shorter because there's more white space on the page. So when you put it into book format, it's still thick.
Yeah.
And if you have a 40,000 word novel in verse, it's going to be a tome. Like, it's just, so you have to keep the word count a little lower. And YA word count goes up to 70,000, I think, at times.
Yeah.
And the way that I write just doesn't sound like a YA voice. So it was sort of, it was a matter of the book itself. Like, all aspects of the book fit into middle grade. I'm really glad, that it has found such a good home, because the subject, the topics, it does push the middle grade genre. It's upper middle grade. It is not typical probably to have this topic, but I feel like kids are going through tough things, and we need books about tough things. It's tough topics are something that I feel is important in middle grade.
Wow. But so you have the tough topic, but with kind of the hopeful ending, or it sounded like you were going for hopeful? Okay.
Yes. Right. Yep.
Not like
a big thread, through my book, is nature as healer. There's a lot of that. How nature, being in nature, nurturing nature, it can actually nurture you back. So there's a lot of that.
Well, so however much detail you want to go into, the next novel that you're working on, is it following the same kind of tough topic kind of pattern, or did you go in a totally different direction? Like, I wrote my one book, I got my tough book out there, now I'm just gonna have fun? Or
yeah, it's kind of following, it's a wholly fictional story, but it's following the same path. I'm not sure what a third novel would look like. I have an idea for it, but
right.
I tend to have this feeling that my middle grade is going to be tougher topics, kind of darker and then my picture books
Yeah,
are,
yeah.
more lighthearted, about nature mostly. But it just feels like where I'm going to write for a little while.
Right. Well, whatever, you do you, so.
Yeah.
But also seeing on your website, you have a lot of art, you have a lot of nature-oriented art, or nature-themed art, I guess you could say. Are you someone who's always, like, outside and hiking or whatever? Especially living in Maine, which is so, you have so much nature around you, right? I'm assuming.
Yeah.
When I was in Maine, I saw a lot of nature, so.
Yes.
But,
Yes, I grew up like in the middle of this gigantic field, and there was a river out back, and it's where I feel grounded, where I feel the most peace, and a lot of that comes through my work. So if I'm not inside working on something, chances are I'm outside. Something I've done recently over the past 5 years is every summer I raise monarchs.
wow.
This summer I'll have released over 150 by the time my last 3 chrysalides be closed.
Wow.
So that's a project that I love doing, and that's so therapeutic to me at the same time that I'm like rescuing these monarchs from a hayfield, like so that they don't get destroyed by the tractor. It's my parents' hayfield. They live nearby, and it gets harvested, and I don't want the butterflies to be harvested.
Yeah.
So I bring them into a greenhouse outside and help them along their way.
Well, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I think you might have a 3rd or 4th novel there with someone who does this, just saying. So, actually, I want to keep going, but we got to round up the time some. I have these 2 random questions I got to ask you, and then there's the final question that I always ask everybody.
Yep.
Just because you mentioned nature and all that kind of stuff, and I was recently rediscovering. Do you ever read? Well, I'm sure you've read Anne of Green Gables. Do you feel like, oh, I kind of live in that kind of space? Because there is so much. She's always talking about the nature and the scenery and how much she just loves being.
Yeah.
Any connection there?
Yeah. Yeah, my yard kind of looks like that, and like nearby. Like I feel very fortunate to have a space that we can, just go out the back door and run in the woods. I love it.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. And then it's all these like middle grade that I'm rediscovering now. I started rereading all these like Dear America books and so like very journal, diary style. And just because you mentioned journaling, do you ever read any journal or diary style, either middle grade or younger reader, and you're like, that's not what kids sound like? I look at my journals and I am everywhere.
I haven't read too many. Well, I know my kids they've loved like Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Yeah.
It's like that wasn't really what mine sounded like, I guess, but that's a totally different like style, right?
Yeah.
Or
the Dork Diaries, yeah.
I have like near my bedside right now, I have Beatrix Potter letters that like I'm looking forward to reading, because she was such a conservationist, and there's this whole other side of her that like wasn't the artist, and so I'm really interested in reading hers. Yeah. Have you
ever re-gone through your journals and looked through them again and like, oh wow, this is interesting, I got to pull this out, or I got to do something with this, or you're just like, those are all in a box somewhere, I'm not looking at those?
They're currently like locked in an attic, and I keep thinking of like going to look at them. I haven't, and I wonder what would be in there.
Yeah. I think I only once ever sort of kept like a journal diary thing, and that was on one of my first overseas trip when I must have been, I don't know, 8 or 9 or something. And the one time I reread it, it was just, we went out, we ate breakfast, we came back, the end. Like really, you can really tell I had the author in me at that time.
Yeah. I mean, it's a slice of life, right?
Yeah, apparently we just ate a lot. I don't know. Even though I know we saw a lot of places, but that's what I documented, so okay.
Right.
Oh man, okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah, well, so very good. This has been, there's so much to talk about, but we're just going to we have to wrap up eventually. Whoever's listening to and whoever's listening to us on their walk, I mean, they're either going to end up in the next state or we have to send them home now. So, I always end off with the question to fill in the blank of, I love it when writers, publishers, whomever, book people do X, and I really don't like it when they do X. So how would you fill in the blank on that one?
So the first one, I would say I chose books. Like, so I love when books encourage kids to be curious about the world. You know, when they read a book and it introduces them to a new idea or something new, and they want to go out and find out more. Like, I love it when books inspire that sense of wonder. And then I don't love it when books have a very didactic or obvious message or lesson. You know, I feel like kids get talked to about lessons and, you know, messages enough.
Right.
That books should be a space that don't do that to them. So I love it when, you know, they're open and they teach kids to have a sense of individuality and discovery. And books should expand their world and not bring it in. So, yeah.
Those are great answers. See, that's why we got to ask these questions. That's fantastic. Very, very. Yeah, we have nothing to add to that. We're just going to end on that beautiful note. And we say thank you so much, Rebekah, for joining us. It has been an absolute delight and treat to speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
This was a bonus episode of Oh My Word podcast featuring librarian, author, and illustrator/artist Rebekah Lowell. To find out more about Rebekah and her work, please see the link in the episode notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe to Oh My Word podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Oh My Word podcast. To find out more, visit el10bound.com. Thanks so much for listening. Catch you next time.